The winter sun had barely risen over St. Helena's Hospital when Dr. Ethan Reed's world quietly shifted. The corridors were filled with the usual rhythm of beeping monitors and hushed footsteps, yet everything inside him stilled the moment he stepped into the nursery. A nurse called him over, her expression unreadable. "Doctor, there's something you should see." She gestured toward a small crib tucked in the corner. Inside lay a newborn, peaceful and still, wrapped in a pale blue blanket. But it wasn't the baby's fragile features that caught Ethan's attention. It was his eyes. The moment they opened, time seemed to stop. Silver blue irises, rimmed with a faint ring of gold, stared directly into his own. Ethan's breath faltered. He had seen rare conditions, genetic anomalies, extraordinary coincidences, but this was none of those. Those eyes were identical to his. He felt his pulse race as fragments of memory surged. An old summer, a face laughing beneath mountain sunlight, a promise he never kept. He swallowed hard, forcing logic to battle the rising panic. "Who is his mother?" he asked quietly. The nurse looked at the chart. Claire Daniels. The name hit him like a physical blow. He turned away, heart pounding, his carefully built world cracking beneath the weight of recognition. 3 years ago he had walked away from her, convinced he could erase emotion with reason. But now, staring into that child's eyes, he realized the past never disappeared. It only waited, patiently, quietly, until the moment it decided to look back at you. 3 years earlier, in the wide stillness of a Montana valley, Ethan had thought he was untouchable. He had spent most of his life chasing logic, avoiding emotion, and mastering control. But then he met Claire Daniels, a woman who made science feel like poetry, and silence feel like connection. She wasn't part of his world of polished conferences and glass towers. She taught children in a small mountain school where the lights flickered and laughter filled the cracks in the walls. He had come to the camp for research. She had come for hope. When she looked at him, it wasn't admiration he saw. It was understanding, something he hadn't realized he'd needed until then. Every conversation with her unraveled a part of his defenses. She questioned everything he believed about certainty and success. He found himself returning night after night, just to listen to her stories of small victories and human resilience. It terrified him how much he cared. But Ethan was a man of plans, and love was never part of his equation. On the last night, when the campfire flickered between them, he wanted to stay, to reach for her hand, to tell her that she had changed something deep inside him. Instead, he chose the only thing he'd ever known, distance. Before dawn, he packed his bag and left without a word. Claire woke to an empty tent, a half-written note left behind, and a silence that would echo for years. Ethan thought leaving would keep him safe. He didn't know it was the beginning of everything he'd lose. Claire waited for weeks that slowly turned into months, holding on to hope like it was her last breath. Every knock at the door, every phone vibration made her heart leap, expecting his voice. But silence was all she ever received. Then one morning, sitting in a small clinic room, she heard words that changed everything. She was going to be a mother. For a long time she couldn't speak. She just stared at the floor, numb, her mind spinning through disbelief, fear, and a faint trace of wonder. She remembered Ethan's steady hands, his restless mind, and his quiet eyes that seemed to hide a storm. How could someone so brilliant be so afraid to feel? She decided not to chase the past. She moved to a quiet town by the sea, where the air smelled like salt and second chances. The days were hard and lonely, but she worked through them, teaching local children, saving every dollar, building a home for the little life growing inside her. The nights were the worst, when memories turned to echoes, and she could almost hear Ethan's voice in the wind. When her son was born, the first thing she noticed were his eyes, those same silver-blue irises framed with gold. They looked up at her with innocent curiosity, unaware of the ache behind her smile. She named him Noah, a name that meant peace, a name she hoped would carry healing. But each time he looked at her, she saw both miracle and memory. The boy was her light and her reminder. Years slipped away like waves fading on the shore, but time never truly softened the memories. Claire built a quiet life, balancing lesson plans and bedtime stories. Yet every day she saw Ethan in small details. The way Noah tilted his head when thinking, the gentle furrow of his brow when curious. It was like watching the past breathe again through a child who had never met the man who shaped half his soul. Noah grew fast, asking questions that sometimes made her heart tighten. "Mom, why don't I have a dad like the others?" She would smile gently and answer, "Because you were born from love, and sometimes love is enough." But deep down, she knew the truth wasn't that simple. Noah's intelligence amazed everyone. At 6, he could solve puzzles meant for adults. His teachers often called Claire, astonished by his focus and his piercing eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Sometimes, late at night, when he was asleep, Claire would sit beside him, tracing her fingers over his small hands and whispering apologies he'd never hear. She told herself she had done the right thing, shielding him from a man who had chosen logic over love. But fate has its own way of finishing what the heart leaves undone. One evening, while cleaning the old attic, Claire found an envelope sealed with Ethan's handwriting. She'd forgotten it existed, unopened all these years. Her hands trembled as she read the first line. "If I ever find the courage you gave me, I'll come back." She didn't know it yet, but those words were a prophecy about to come true. The letter haunted her for nights. Every word seemed alive, whispering through the quiet of her small house. Claire couldn't sleep. She sat by the window watching the sea crash against the rocks, wondering if Ethan ever thought of the son he never met. Noah, now 7, had begun sketching machines and writing strange symbols that even his teachers couldn't explain. One afternoon, his science project caught the attention of a local journalist, a miniature water purifier designed from scrap metal and glass jars. "Where did you learn this?" they asked. Noah smiled and said softly, "I just saw it in my head." It was the same phrase Ethan used to say when ideas came to him in flashes. Claire's chest ached with a mix of pride and fear. Her son wasn't just bright. He was his father's reflection in every possible way. That night, as the rain fell against the window, Noah found the old letter on the table. "Who wrote this, Mom?" he asked, his voice full of quiet curiosity. Claire froze. The truth pressed hard against her heart. "Someone I once knew," she whispered. "Someone who made a choice to leave." Noah studied her face for a long moment, then folded the letter gently. "Maybe he didn't know how to stay," he said simply, and walked away. Those words shattered her more than anger ever could. For the first time, she felt that the story she had buried was beginning to rise again, carried by the same eyes that had once looked at her with love. And somewhere far away, destiny was already preparing the reunion she had long feared and secretly hoped for. The airport was alive with chaos, voices blending into echoes, wheels rolling across the polished floor, and sunlight cutting through glass walls like fire. Ethan Reed hadn't planned to be there that morning. His flight to Boston had been rerouted through Seattle because of a storm, and he was irritated, lost in thought, scanning emails on his phone. But then, without warning, his world stilled again. Across the crowded terminal, a little boy stood beside a woman with auburn hair tied loosely in a braid. The child turned, eyes catching the light, and Ethan froze mid-step. Those eyes, silver blue ringed with gold, the same pattern he saw in the mirror every day. It was like time folded in on itself, collapsing 3 years of denial into one piercing heartbeat. The boy tilted his head, curious, and for a fleeting second, Ethan felt the impossible, recognition. Claire turned then, and their eyes met. For a moment neither moved. The crowd melted into a blur, and it was as if the universe had orchestrated this collision to finish what both had run from. Ethan walked closer, his pulse thundering in his ears. Claire's lips parted, but no words came. "Is he?" he began, voice breaking. She nodded once, tears gathering but refusing to fall. "His name is Noah," she whispered. The boy looked up between them, unaware of the storm he had just uncovered. Ethan knelt, meeting those familiar eyes at last. "You have your mother's heart," he said softly, "and my eyes." For the first time he smiled, a real, unguarded smile. It wasn't redemption yet, but it was the beginning. Sometimes life doesn't offer second chances. It waits, patiently, for you to recognize them when they finally appear.